Right. Hello and welcome to the show. Mystery Go and the Feral Monk back for episode number 3 of this second season. And we're going to be discussing Niyamas today. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Monk.
Nice to be here.
Hope you're doing well today.
I am. Just getting over a cold this whole last week, so I haven't been quite as sharp as normal.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's that time of year.
It is. And I got kids.
It makes it even more difficult.
And they love to share, especially around the holidays.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so right off the bat, I'm gonna quiz myself again on the Niyamas, and there's 5 of them, just like there were 5 yamas. And start off with is Saucha, and then there's Santosha, then it's followed by Tapas, and then Svadhyaya, and then Ishvara Pradhana. Excuse my pronunciation.
Well done.
Okay.
Well done. Ishvara Pradhana.
Yes. Sounds so much better when
It's not an easy language. No, I don't say it properly either. It's a difficult language.
Right. Yeah, so basically, we were talking about the yamas last week, and basically how they're kind of, the dealing with kind of like the social interactions that we have. And then so this week we're talking about the niyamas, and they're more of like an observance of those social interactions, like a personal or individual observance, I guess, a looking inwards. So Saucha starting out is about purity and cleanliness, as I've heard it referred to as well. How does that fit into kind of what the ascetics were thinking with these, Mr. Monk?
Well, I would imagine in the ascetic mindset, they're going to be thinking of it as mind, body, and speech. So they're trying to become, purity, not just in maybe how they would eat, like a dietary thing, or purity but it really comes down to trying to not dwell on impure or negative or destructive thinking, and to promote and cultivate positive and judicious and sort of a mind of great willpower and concentration.
Yeah, a lot of discipline.
Yeah, and then with the speech, of course, that ties into the yamas in the sense of satya, which is truthfulness, purity of speech. You're not going to tell lies or exaggerate or mislead or deceive.
Right. Yeah, I think it's cool how they the niyamas and yamas kind of tie in hand and work with each other.
It's something that makes them extremely practical, and that makes it very useful structuring of those things.
Yeah. So next would be Santosha, and that's kind of talking about contentment and maybe not chasing after your fruits of labor so much. I guess kind of deals a little bit with acceptance. No?
Yeah, definitely. Santosha is the idea of, if you think about it in general, these are all just really good basic ideas on a spiritual path. They're going to, if those are at your foundation, those are informing how you practice your practices and what goals you're setting and what direction you're moving in your development, then you're going to end up at a positive outcome. So the cleanliness or whatever is gonna help you towards a positive outcome. The purity of your diet and all of these different things are going to help you in having that positive outcome. Santosha is then the idea of like being content with like the circumstances that you have, like where you are in your life and what's going on around you. It's not an acceptance of like, oh God, you know, like I guess I just give up. You know, it's not that. It's sort of an optimistic. You know, it's the spiritual path. You know, you wouldn't be taking on observances if you didn't think, or at least have the attitude that you're going to be able to perform them and benefit from them. You know,
Right.
so it has to do with that really being accepting of your circumstances, how they are. You know, it's going to help for meditation later on, being able to see the world as it is, because you're not trying to manage it and rearrange it and manipulate it,
Right.
and all of that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that being, you know, kind of like a difficult, you know, because you want to maybe change your situation sometimes. If you're in a horrible situation, you know, so I don't think that, you know, someone's in a war torn country and, you know, they don't need to just sit there and accept where they are, you know, or, you know,
yeah, no,
some
exactly.
circumstances of, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, these are ascetic practices.
Mm-hmm.
These were intended for people who took the time, left everything, all of society's obligations,
Yes.
went out into nature, and spent years on end exploring all of these different things, developing different techniques, trying them out, communicating between different groups, developing entire philosophies and stuff, trying to interpret the similarities of experience that people were having. I mean, there's a whole thing behind all of those developments, you know, and so somebody who isn't in that, you know, because that's something that can irk you from the modern new age teachers or whatever. It's just sort of this feeling of like, oh, you know, just change your situation, and it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, that's not always possible, you know.
Right.
But you might be able to use some collage of different techniques to help you deal with the things that you're unable to change, you know, that are about you, and
it gives you a little bit of you know, mindset to be able to determine what things maybe should change, which things maybe are within your control to change.
Or and mostly, like, if you can remain centered and calm and go through the storm, you know, without considerably, you know, having like mental or emotional damage from the storms of life, you know. So it's kind of like trying to help you buffer those kinds of things, you know?
Yeah.
Because and so,
can be very helpful.
You know, that's just a sensitivity thing. I mean, the thing is like, you know, I approach this whole thing like as a practitioner. So, you know, I don't think of myself as being like a yoga teacher or something like that. I'm just fascinated. I think it's an amazing subject, you know, but it's something that I notice a lot of times, like teachers aren't as sensitive to all the people in the room or to who they're broadcasting to, in the sense that, like, you know, it's not everyone can just change their circumstances. So
no, they can't.
And it's not necessarily be content with being oppressed or with being violated violently or sexually or something. It's not saying that at all.
No, I just wanted to clarify that. You know?
Yeah,
I mean, something to bring up. That out. Yeah. But next is Tapas, and I know that that you you know, when we talked about it before, you mentioned that this was kind of a clue that the yogic life was ascetic. You know, that it was kind of based around the ascetics.
Yeah, because tapas, which is austerity, you know, a lot of people want to, you know, translate it into a softer version of the word, so, you know, they'll just call it discipline. But, you know, as we already know, yama is discipline.
Right.
So, you know, it wouldn't be discipline and discipline. You wouldn't put them, you know, repeating into the two lists. No. So, but the tapas has to do with austerities.
Yeah, and, accepting like a challenge as a aid for purification, right? Yeah,
exactly. That's a really nice way of putting it. And so that was called tapasya. And so that would be where you get the images of like yogis standing in a particular posture or with their arm raised, for 12, 30, 40 years.
Right.
Sometimes the nails just like growing like back into the hand, and like, and
Crazy.
it's has to do with determination and will and control of the body. And it's a very extreme form of penance for old karma and stuff like that. It has to do with trying to get yourself free from the wheel of karmic reincarnation. So it has to do with a lot of the viewpoints of those ascetic cultures that they developed in. And so, something about that today, that we can take into our practice is just not necessarily just the idea of discipline, but this sort of like this heat, like taking on like the bigger challenges, like not just always going for what's easiest or what's the easiest thing to accomplish,
Right.
but like taking on some of these like bigger things and being willing to sort of sacrifice a little bit of like egoity and self-comfort and things like that to accomplish some things. And,
what does tapa? Does it top mean in Sanskrit? Does it mean fire or to burn?
Means
or something?
heat. Yeah, it means heat.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, and the next one is Svadhyaya.
Svadhyaya. Yeah. I was going to say quickly just about Tapas.
Do it.
One of the modern people, the Iceman, Wim Hof. He's sort of become famous for
Right.
Hacking his biology through the use of cold water. And back in the day, in like the early day, definitely at Patanjali's time and before, one of the tapasyas was exactly the kinds of things that he does, like staying for very long periods of time in very cold water, doing certain types of breathing, or in the monsoon season, they stay outside the whole monsoon season. So they stay in the rain the whole time. That's a tapasya. One of them is the duni, which is it's like a fire. So in like the middle of summer on the hottest day at noon when the sun's just like beaten down, they make a ring of fire around them made out of cow patties. And then they sit in the middle until all of that burns down. And then they might close up with a few asanas or postures or whatever. And then so that's their tapasya for the summer season. Excuse me.
All good.
And so, I just wanted to mention that a little bit more
that,
because, there's so much, a lot of times I feel like last episode, I felt like I was reaching for words and they just weren't coming because there's just so much to talk about. It's such a cool, such a cool world to dive into. But we should move on. I know we got time limit. Wanting to keep this succinct for everyone. So
I'm really glad you shared that. Yeah. So thank you.
Svadhyaya is the study of self. It's you can take it in like a few different ways. It can be literally looking inside and seeing like what's all's going on inside of you and studying it. Like what is me? What are just thoughts? Which thoughts are coming from the influences of other people, or from social media, or from the news, or from political narratives, or cultural narratives, or religious narratives. So it can be study of the self in that sense, which is what it would have been more like for the ascetics. It would have meant to like look inward and study yourself, and today and over time it's come to include. Yes, it has. Yeah.
I was just going to say that. I'm sure that the ascetics used the scriptures, but you're saying more so
if they had access to them. I mean, a lot of scriptures for a long time, especially in India, were done orally. They were transmitted orally to like certain meters and rhythms, and they moved their hands to keep those meters. And we've probably all had that experience of like a song getting stuck in your mind and you can't get it out, or one of your favorite songs. If someone were to suddenly sing the lyrics wrong or like add a different melody to it or something, you would notice it immediately. And so for a long time, this technique was used to pass down knowledge and practices and stuff like that before scriptures were written down. And the early ones were written down on a lot of times on like palm leaf type manuscripts and stuff. And so those are going to deteriorate over time. And
Yeah.
you know, so the oral traditions there are super rich. And so sorry, I don't.
And
Before
then,
I just babble on again.
no. And then to wrap it up, be Ishvara Pradhana. And
Pranidhana.
Pranidhana. And that's basically, like a surrendering, like a letting go, devotion to God or something bigger than oneself.
Yeah. Well, something bigger than oneself, that's something we can add to it, because, we're not diving into these things to like have to be strict by the letter of this thing. That's a kind of strange type of ego imitation. It's not what you take on these kinds of practices and stuff for. You're taking them on because you want like the real fruit from these things, these insights, or these like techniques of exploration. You want to for yourself to like go into it. So,
right. Yeah.
So it has to do with, surrendering to God, but that in our modern context, you could, why not expand that to be, however you choose to express that. The word God has become quite heavily laden for most people. It can be a triggering word for a lot of people. So, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a conception or an intimation themselves of something greater than themselves. Maybe that word has become too heavy to use for people, but that's the situation going on there, is surrender to God.
Yeah, I think that one reminds me of like aparigraha, the last yama.
Yeah, achieving a certain level of parigraha will definitely help you to Ishvara Pranidhana. If you can let go of that greediness and that covetousness, if that's a real word. If you can let go of those kinds of things, then you're definitely going to help yourself to surrender more.
Yeah. Well, I think this would be a great time if you wanted to talk about the other 10 niyamas.
That's something fascinating, right? Like, in the development of yoga, especially Hatha yoga, which is what we think of as like postural yoga today, which is much broader in its traditional sense. But in the Hatha Pradipika and in some of the Upanishad and in some other minor texts here and there, those 5 very ascetic-like niyamas developed into what is often called like the 10 niyamas. And what's interesting about it is you can see like sort of the how the ascetic style of the tradition eventually grew from this tapasya, these super arduous things, into more of like the postural yoga that we think of today, being pretty much the tapas or the tapasya of the yogi. In modern sense is the posture. So you can kind of see these kinds of developments, but you can also see this development away from this individual exploration of one's consciousness toward a version that is clothed very heavily in religious language and ideas. And so, because it's not something that, I tend to blend Vipassana and Patanjali and the Hatha postural tradition with maybe a bit of perspective on Christianity. That's, for me, like, that blends together really nicely for my own spiritual development, right? But each person find their own thing. But so for me, like, I'm not very familiar with these, so I pulled them up so that I don't leave them out and can really make the point that I wanted to make out of it. So some of the things that end up in those 10 niyamas in the later development of Hatha. Tapas is still there, so tapasya is still there, the austerity. Santosha is still there, the contentment and optimistic acceptance of one's circumstances. There's an astikya, which is faith in the self. So this is the first time that we hear anything about faith, right? But there's this idea of sort of faith in the self, a belief in God, faith in God. So this comes up instead of surrender to God as an individual to the Creator, to this immense consciousness that encompasses everything. It's more of taking on this faith or this belief in that thing. In Dana is where you get generosity, charity, and sharing with others. This would be an example of one that's really good to take on. Mm-hmm. That would be great to incorporate into your practice, you know? Why not? You don't have to incorporate, faith in the self or in God. But and what's interesting here is where Ishvara Pranidhana becomes Ishvara Pujana. And puja is a religious ritual. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes worship of God instead of what we saw before, the individual's attempt to attain to God and to unite with God and these kinds of, now it becomes of a worship type of idea in Pujana. Then you have Siddhanta Vakya Shravana, which has to do with listening to the ancient scriptures. So now we're also, instead of just self-study, we're at the point where like studying the self includes study of the scriptures, right? So it's placing an importance on religious scriptural tradition. Then after that you would have Hari. And Hari is remorse and acceptance for one's past with modesty and humility. Another great one to adapt into your practice. Why not take that one onto your list of niyamas? It's a great one. You know, everyone should have a good balance between remorse, acceptance, and getting over the bullshit we've all done in our past, you know, and try to do better than that, you know. So why not? The next one would be Mukti. Mukti is to think and reflect, to understand, and to reconcile conflicting ideas. So, this pretty much in Patanjali's system is going to be taken care of in meditation. You know, mm-hmm. That's pretty much going to be taken care of there. But here it's given extra as a thing to do, as a practice. Japa is the mantra repetition, so it's the reciting of prayers and chanting. And then you have hutta or vrata, and they're the rituals, ceremonies, fulfilling religious vows, rules, and observances faithfully. So there you can really see like how over time it developed a little bit of religious garment around it. And this is why you can see in the history so many different traditions where you have like the Vaishnava yogis, and you have the Shaiva yogis, and you have Buddhist yogis, and you have Tantra yogis, and you have Taoist yogis, and you know, so
fascinating. So do these other niyamas that you just mentioned, do they come after Patanjali's?
They come after Patanjali's. Maybe like one or two of them you might already find as like an idea in the Upanishad, but not part of like a definite list.
Yeah.
So this is like the time period where things were being correlated and compiled, and like compilations of text were being done, re-edits of text were being done. The Hatha Pradipika isn't necessarily just a text written out by Swami, forgotten his name.
Satchidananda?
No, yeah, it doesn't matter. But it wasn't from the author himself alone. It's compiling other disparate texts also from other groups or in exchanges whenever they come to meeting and things. And you have to remember, all of this aesthetic tradition is developing in a culture that has the Kumbh Mela. the biggest religious gathering on the planet of the earth. You know, like 15 million holy people and spiritual tourists descend on one place. It's, you know, insanity.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we're at a good place to wrap it up. You know, I think, you know, kind of in summary, I think it's interesting that the Yamas come first, and that, you know, they you know, like I mentioned at the beginning, that they focus on the social interactions. So it seems like an emphasis or an importance on, you know, all these things in the external world, you know, kind of how we deal with them, how we let them affect us and stuff, and how to master those. And then the Niyamas,
at least start working on them.
At least start to work on them. Yeah. But is a good ground foundation, you know, ground base for trying to master yourself. And then bless you. And then the Niyamas, the you know, the individual observances, just kind of feel like it digs down deeper. And yeah, it's providing you an excellent toolkit for living.
Yeah, even if you didn't go any further along the yogic path, already just adopting those two things, even being from whatever religious background, you know, it'll keeping those will make you a better Muslim. It'll make you a better Christian. It'll make you a better Hindu. It'll make you a better person. If you're an atheist, it'll
make, make you a better atheist. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing, you know, harmful there except, you know, looking at yourself in the mirror.
And practicing things like that. I mean, you have to consciously take on the religion for it, you know, you don't have to, especially with yoga, you don't have to accept the cultural garb that it's dressed in. It's respectful to understand it and know about it. But in the end, the whole point of yoga is the individual spiritual journey, and giving sort of like a guidebook. And Patanjali's is an incredible guidebook that actually, until modern times, wasn't referenced. Patanjali doesn't show up in other scriptures, you know, which is an interesting thing too, that now it's so referenced.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, next week we're going to be discussing asana, and we're very much looking forward to that one. Hope you guys are too. Want to thank everyone out there for listening and watching, and please subscribe and hit that like button. Share.
Yeah, and you know, leave a comment down below. You know, we'd love to interact with you guys out there who are listening. If you've got questions or even just your own experience with the yamas and the niyama or with yoga, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for mentioning that. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Monk, and Mr. Ego out.